we transition to an early wide receiver, and I think one of the most controversial early wide receivers that we've had maybe in a long time, and maybe not even the most controversial in his own draft, since Dotson also controversial. But we have Chris Olave. He goes to New Orleans. They spent a lot to go get him. We hear all of these sources talking about how he's the most pro-ready wide receiver, and you're like, I mean, is that like being sneaky fast? Is this code for like, he better be good this year because his ceiling is lower than the rest of these guys? I mean, his ceiling is lower. It's hard to get behind him, I think, when Curtis Patrick, who obviously is a gigantic Ohio State fan and one of the best dynasty players out there, isn't behind him. Take us through what you're looking at here, the questions with the Saints, the new coach, the Kamara suspension, potentially, Michael Thomas. How does Olave fit in, and where do you like him relative to the line?
With Olave in general, he is really intriguing because he's not the early declare, but he did break out, at a relatively young age, or, early in college, broke out earlier in college than Garrett Wilson did. He does have the draft capital. He's been productive in college for multiple seasons. And the landing spot, I'm a little bit ambivalent about it, but like long-term, who really knows what's happening with the quarterback situation, but we have seen Jamis Winston previously support multiple wide receivers. Michael Thomas, he's expected to play this year, or to be ready in time for the season. But, we've heard that before. And even if he is back, I don't think he's going to be that kind of target monster that he was previously, especially because they did just invest so much in Chris Olave. It wasn't just getting him, with the number 11 pick. It was trading up for him, trading next year's number 1. It was just, it's unbelievable what they gave away.
They give up a lot. They give up a quarterback kind of haul to get
yes.
Olave.
It's amazing that they gave away so much and then did not take a quarterback. But, all that said, I'm going over 739.5 yards receiving for him because, he of the factors that I mentioned, but then, and whether this is euphemistic for low ceiling, he is, like quote unquote, NFL ready, so I do think that he's going to come in and get significant number of targets right away. And Michael Thomas, again, I'm a little bit skeptical about the usage that he's going to have, and then the efficiency he's going to have with that usage. So Olave, I think, actually has maybe a higher ceiling than is kind of appreciated, just in part because there is like the Michael Thomas contingency of Olave might actually be the number 1 receiver this year. And like, that's not outrageously likely, but I think the odds of that happening are higher than people are expecting. But I think 100 targets is a pretty reasonable floor for Olave. And if Thomas has a setback or is just inefficient, there's, I think, significant room for more, especially on top of that with the idea that maybe Kamara is suspended for a little bit of the season.
Yeah, there could be a lot of extra targets coming his way if those two potential things do happen. The teams we are talking about, and around the NFL, there's been more moving parts this offseason, it feels like, than any in recent memory, but a lot of change happening in New Orleans with the coaches and the quarterback. And you did touch on Michael Thomas. I'm just going to go back and touch on that again. Is he finished as a wide receiver 1? Is there a chance of a bounce back? He's currently going in the 4th round in terms of ADP, and he's not somebody who, is really on my radar at all this year. I think he probably should be going the 6th round or below based on what we've seen over the last, 2 years or so. But what's your thoughts on Thomas from a bounce back perspective?
Yeah, I don't think that Michael Thomas is, like done, but I mean, how old is he now? He's 29, like the thing is, like, a 29-year-old receiver should still be good enough, especially if he was good before. Like, he should still kind of be like, if not in the heart of his prime, at least like solidly still in his prime. But that's not taking into account like the fact that Michael Thomas has played, I think, 7 games in the past 2 years, and that the coach has said like, yeah, we're expecting Michael Thomas to play, but the coach also said he still has a few hurdles to clear, which is like, how does he still have hurdles to clear when he hasn't played football in well over a year? So I'm skeptical about him being, a real number 1 wide receiver for fantasy. But he has upside. Like, I think that is undeniable based on what we've seen. He has upside. So I would say, like, I think that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 borderline is probably where I'd be comfortable drafting him. That might be a little bit lower than his ADP.
That comment with the hurdles to clear is, you remove him from your board entirely, right? That's like Pete Carroll saying Chris Carson is having great rehab, but we're going to draft Kenneth Walker. So
next up is the Washington Commanders. I'm still getting used to saying that. And Jahan Dotson, obviously Dotson going in the first round, and a lot of question marks, I guess we'll say, around the decision by the Commanders to take him there. His under, and this is the first one you've recommended to go under, and that is 709.5 receiving yards on the year. I'm not going to go straight into Dotson himself. I'm going to check in on the quarterback situation, and that is, how do you feel about the quarterback situation in Washington, and then who beats out Carson Wentz for the starting job?
Who beats out Wentz? That's great. I think Wentz is the starter, but I don't know. Like, I think Sam Howell, for a guy who is a 5th rounder, has an incredibly good chance of making a start at some point this year. Whether it's Wentz underperforming or Wentz suffering an unfortunate injury, whatever it is, I think Howell will probably make a start at some point. But this Washington team is disgusting. Like, Wentz, he's not like horrible. Like, he probably is one of the 32 best quarterbacks on the planet. So he probably should be starting, but man, like, maybe he's number 32. And this coaching staff, I don't believe, has a really strong hold on how to use its players. And then they just keep on adding players to kind of muddy the waters here. So Antonio Gibson, I would have loved to be on Antonio Gibson, but JD McKissick is still there. And then they drafted Brian Robinson. And like Terry McLaurin, I would love to be on Terry McLaurin, but they drafted Jahan Dotson. And they drafted De'Ami Brown the year before that. And Curtis Samuel is still there. Like, and Logan Thomas, he's coming back from injury. So it's just like, all of these players, I look at them and I just think, like, I want to be very hands-off on this situation.
Published an article yesterday talking about how I felt like, and you had all of those fun, like, all the kinds of arbitrage articles on RotoViz back in the beginning. So we're going to go ahead and throw that term out, even though it's not exactly appropriate. Is Dotson sort of an arbitrage play on Olave when we look at rookie drafts? They're going in very different places because everybody hates Dotson. His size, production, the 4th-year situation, and then Washington, it's like you can look at that and say, I would prefer 4th and 5th round wide receivers than this guy who was drafted in the top 16. Just how bad is he as a prospect, or is he really not? And then you mentioned Terry McLaurin. I don't think Terry McLaurin is draftable. And so obviously somebody who would seem to slot in behind him for targets, that's also problematic, right?
Yeah. Dotson is interesting. I would say that, yeah, if I'm trying to be objective, like looking at sort of the median scenario, yeah, he probably is the arbitrage version of Olave, in that, they have draft capital investment that's not like totally dissimilar. They were drafted within the same range of each other. They were both 4-year players, kind of similar size, similar enough type of athleticism. Number 2 wide receivers on their team. Yeah, you can see like the arbitrage case. Like, it is very present. And even if you're looking at just the prop market, Olave 739.5 yards. Jahan Dotson, 709.5. Like that's very, very comparable in terms of like what the book is projecting. So yeah, you can make the case for them being arbitrageable. The thing is that I think Olave has a ceiling and a floor that Dotson does not have. Like I think Dotson has a significantly lower floor and a significantly lower ceiling. So in the median, I can see it, but in terms of how I would want to invest in them, I don't really want to touch Dotson. Like that said, like part of arbitrage is that this guy is significantly cheaper than the other guy. So from like a cost adjusted perspective, yeah, like I can see the case for investing in Dotson.
So McLaurin, 5th round ADP, all of these amazing peripherals. You pull up, the air yards leaders over the past several seasons, the guys who have that profile where they're getting not only targets, but targets at depth, where if you hit on these targets, obviously the production is going to be there. It's basically superstars, DJ Moore and Terry McLaurin. I think that you can tell yourself maybe a better story about DJ Moore still, even though he's got tons of problems in his situation. But I've gotten to the point where, especially in part because I think that perhaps McLaurin's early efficiency, and we still saw him make some amazing plays last year. So, I mean, it's not like he's not a good player, but I think that when you look at his profile coming in, you look at just how good he was early, that may be anchoring us to a level that isn't quite fair to him, especially now within the context of this offense. Is he someone who's draftable? And then just kind of to throw in, I mean, is there a possibility here that after Washington works out for a handful of times and they see Sam Howell throw to De'Ami Brown the way that he did in college, they're like, okay, that combination needs to be what we emphasize this year?
That last part is interesting. I'll say, I think that you mentioned DJ Moore earlier on that list of, kind of superstars or guys with superstar type of metrics. I would be more optimistic about DJ Moore than Terry McLaurin. Moore is younger, and Moore at least has like the sort of the unknown box, like the mystery box of Matt Corral as someone who might be throwing to him. Howell, as much as I'm kind of intrigued by him, he's a 5th rounder, and so I don't want to be like super into the idea. And like Carson Wentz is still going to be the main guy. So I'm not as optimistic on McLaurin relative to DJ Moore. And like you see that reflected in how they're ranked and how they're drafted across the industry. And looking at Sam Howell more, that idea of Washington looking at him as a 5th rounder and looking at De'Ami Brown as a 3rd rounder and thinking we really need to put these guys together, especially when they just drafted Dotson in the 1st round as someone who maybe would replace Brown because they weren't satisfied with him last year. That is, I don't know. It's not that it's unthinkable. It's just a little too imaginative for me.
It is imaginative, and
it's
that's what imaginations are for. We'll see if that can come through. It is very frustrating because even in like 30 roster spot leagues, you are in a situation where you have to consider cutting De'Ami Brown after a year, which that's unfortunate because he's a fun guy to hold on to there.